Hey guys, it's Chaos Sniper, and today, the new set of Pokemon cards, Chaos Rising, has just been released internationally, and I'm here today to show you all the new cards, tell you what I think is going to be the most interesting and what's going to wreak the most chaos on the metagame. So without further ado, let's look at all the new cards, man. Okay guys, so here I am in my browser looking at all the new cards on limitlesstcg.com. The first thing I'm noticing that's interesting here is Beedrill EX. It's got 310 HP, it's a grass type, it's a stage 2, and for 1 energy, it's got the Rumbling Beast attack. And it does 100 damage for each of your Beedrill and Beedrill EX in play. I think this is interesting because you could have like 3 or 4 Beedrill EX in play and be able to do massive amounts of damage, like over 300, over 400 damage for 1 energy is insane. I'm gonna have to build a deck with this in a future video. I've looked at the City League deck lists over in Japan with this card, and they play it with Didon Sparks as a draw engine and Orbaliva EX from Destined Rivals as a second attacker, so I think I might have to build my own version of that deck. And it seems like Kakuna has got an ability called Exoskeleton that lets it take 20 less damage from attacks after applying weakness and resistance, so that should hopefully make Beedrill EX a little bit easier to set up, just at least a little bit. Also, Carnivine I think looks like it's going to be a pretty good card because Chomp Hole does 80 damage, but if your opponent's active Pokemon has no retreat cost, this attack does 80 more damage, which would total 160. That's pretty good. I'm just scrolling a little bit. Okay. Next thing I'm seeing that's interesting is Chestnut with its Needly Armor ability. It says if this Pokemon is in the active spot and it is damaged by an attack from your opponent's Pokemon, even if this Pokemon is knocked out, place 3 damage counters on the attacking Pokemon for each grass energy attached to this Pokemon. I have a few different ideas for this deck. The main one is playing this like with Teal Mask Ogerpon and Meganium. Meganium will double the value of grass energy basically, and Teal Mask Ogerpon is kind of like a draw engine. Maybe you could attach something like Hero's Cape to Chestnut to give it a little bit more HP. Yeah, if you could find like the perfect like healing card for this, you can make this like immortal and like punish your opponents for attacking your Chestnut. That would be really, really funny. But yeah. Um, okay. This Ninetales is also pretty interesting. Its attack for 1 fire energy, Ninetale transfer. Move all damage counters from one of your benched Pokemon to your opponent's active Pokemon. I think this is meant to be played with Mega Pyroar, because it's... Hold on, let me scroll down. Yeah, its attack Fiery Big Bang does 290 base damage, but its attack does 10 less damage for each damage counter on this Pokemon. So what I think the developers of the set had in mind is to use Ninetale Transfer to move all damage counters from your Mega Pyroar onto your opponent's active Pokemon, so that Fiery Big Bang would do 290 damage again. But I think Ninetales could be a lot more useful than just that. I think that it has a lot more uses than that. I think people could run this in any deck as just kind of a last minute attack option, because if you've got a high HP Pokemon with a lot of damage on it on your bench, you could put Ninetales in the active spot, use Ninetale Transfer for 1 fire energy to move all that damage to your opponent's active Pokemon, and just completely turn the game around. So I think that's really awesome. Speaking of really awesome, we've got Delphox down here with its ability Flaring Magic. Once during your turn, you may discard a basic fire energy card from your hand in order to use this ability. Draw cards until you have 7 cards in your hand. So it seems like fire decks have finally gotten a draw engine of their own, and discarding a basic energy card from your hand and to draw cards until you have 7 in your hand, that's a very, very good draw engine right there. I think this will see a lot of play in a lot of fire decks. Yeah, I've already talked about Mega Pyroar and Fiery Big Bang, but its other attack, Ferocious Bellow, it does 80 damage, but it's got an effect that says during your opponent's next turn, attacks used by the defending Pokemon do 50 less damage before applying weakness and resistance. So I think that could be okay, I guess. Sorry, I'm stumbling through my words and not knowing what to say. I'm new to YouTube. I suck. Please bear with me. Okay. Next thing I see that's interesting is Octillery with its Jet of Ink attack. It says during your opponent's next turn, if the defending Pokemon tries to use an attack, your opponent flips 2 coins. If either of them is tails, that attack doesn't happen. That is a really, really good attack effect, because even if your opponent had to flip 1 coin, he or she's only got like a 50% chance of actually landing an attack, but 2 coins, and if either of them is tails, that makes it even harder to attack, because you could have like Octillery in the active spot, use Jet of Ink for 30 damage, and then have like an air balloon or something attached, so that way if the defending Pokemon can't attack during your opponent's next turn, your Octillery is basically protected. And then, yeah, if you have an air balloon attached to it, you can retreat into something more powerful. Sorry, had to burp. But yeah, you could retreat into something more powerful and use a really big attack and stuff. Ah, dang, I'm really struggling right now. Okay. Delibird is also a pretty interesting card because its attack Pleasing Present. Each player may attach up to 3 basic energy cards from their hand to their Pokemon in any way they like. Your opponent does this first. Okay, so a good energy accelerator right here. This could be useful in a lot of decks that require multiple different types of energy, or just require a lot of energy to get their attackers going. The one problem I have with this card is your opponent gets to do it too, so that kind of sucks. But I guess we'll see how it does in future videos. Okay, here we have the card that named my YouTube channel, Mega Greninja EX, with its ability Mortal Shuriken. Once during your turn, if this Pokemon is in the active spot, you may discard a basic water energy card from your hand in order to use this ability. Place 6 damage counters on one of your opponent's Pokemon. And it's also got an attack called Ninja Spinner. It does 120 damage, costs 2 water energy. You may put a water energy attached to this Pokemon into your hand and have this attack do 80 more damage, meaning it would do 200 damage instead of 120. Instead of having 2 water energies attached to Mega Greninja, you could use Neo Upper Energy. That's what I do in my Mega Greninja deck that I built. I'm going to put that in my next video, so stay tuned for that. Also, Froggy is pretty cool too because of summoning Jutsu. Search your deck for up to 3 Pokemon, reveal them, and put them into your hand, and then shuffle your deck. That's really helpful for when you're like setting up your board, because it'll search for 3 different Pokemon you need, and put them into your hand, and then you can play them next turn. Okay, moving on to Avalugg. This is a card I've actually seen played in the deck when I was testing out my Mega Greninja deck. I think the main appeal of this card is Iceberg Breaker. It says discard the top 6 cards of your deck, and this attack does 60 damage for each basic water energy card you discarded in this way. So it's kind of like a slightly weaker version of Mega Abomasnow, because Mega Abomasnow did 100 damage for each water energy discarded from the top 6 cards of your deck instead of 60. But yeah, I think Avalugg could be like a nice non-EX version of the Mega Abomasnow deck. I actually have a Mega Abomasnow deck. I don't use it in ranked because it doesn't really win a whole lot, but it's really fun when it works. Moving on to lightning types here. Looks like we only have 4 in the set. Yeah, the most interesting one that I'm seeing is Ampharos with its ability Synchro Pulse. If you have the same number of cards in your hand as your opponent, attacks used by this Pokemon do 80 more damage to your opponent's active Pokemon before applying weakness and resistance. And its attack Flashing Bolt. So during your next turn, this Pokemon can't use Flashing Bolt, so yeah, that kind of sucks. But if you do have the same number of cards in your hand as your opponent does, you could do 220 damage for 2 energy, and that's pretty insane. I think this would be like a harder combo to pull off because it's kind of hard to get the same number of cards in your hand as your opponent. unless you use a card that makes both you and your opponent shuffle their hands into their decks and draw the same number of cards, like Judge, for example. Yeah, I don't really see a whole lot of potential for this card, but we'll see how things go over the next couple months. Okay, moving on to Psychic types. And gotta make sure the window doesn't block the cards here. Okay, so we got 4 different Deoxys, which is pretty insane. First one, it's attack Genome Charge. Search your deck for up to 2 basic energy cards and attach them to this Pokemon, then shuffle your deck. Second attack, Psychic. This attack does 20 more damage for each energy attached to your opponent's active Pokemon, with a base damage of 80 for 3 energies. Second Deoxys, for 3 Psychic energy, we got Psy Spear. If this Pokemon has at least 2 extra energy attached in addition to this attack's cost, this attack also does 120 damage to one of your opponent's benched Pokemon. Don't apply weakness and resistance for benched Pokemon. That's kind of cool, but 5 Psychic energy attack cost, that's pretty high, and it only has 120 HP. I don't think I'd make a deck with this, but this card's still pretty interesting. Yeah, Deoxys number 3. It's got the attack Psy Protection for 2 Psychic Energy and 1 Colorless that does 80 damage. During your opponent's next turn, prevent all damage done to this Pokemon by attacks from Pokemon that have an ability. Kind of reminds me of Cornerstone Mask Ogerpon, because it's got an ability that reads, I'm paraphrasing, but it's something like prevent all damage done to this Pokemon by attacks from your opponent's Pokemon that have an ability. So this is kind of like the Psychic type version of that, I guess. Deoxys number 4, it's attack for 1 Psychic Energy, Psy Speed does 30 damage. You may draw cards until you have 5 cards in your hand. I think maybe you could use this as a draw engine in Psychic type decks. I don't think this is going to be too bad. Okay, Mega Float EX. This card has been like a major disappointment, man. In my opinion, this card really sucks. Mainly because of its second attack, Eternity Bloom. It says, search your deck for up to 4 basic Psychic Energy cards and attach them to your bench Pokemon in any way you like, then shuffle your deck. I don't think that part of the attack is bad. It's just the high cost of the attack. It costs 3 Psychic Energies, only does 200 damage. It's not going to one-hit knock out a Fazandipede EX or a Tealmask Ogerpon or anything like that. I think if they made the attack cost 1 less Psychic Energy and maybe nerfed the effect a little bit, like maybe 2 or 3 basic Psychic Energies instead of 4, and maybe it doing a little bit more damage, I think this card would be a lot better. But no, this card kind of sucks in my opinion. But if you have a differing opinion, let me know in the comments section, and I'll hear you out. Just be respectful. Yeah, this card also has 250 HP, and with cards like the Stadium card, Ange Floette. Sorry if I'm pronouncing it wrong. I don't play Pokemon ZA Legends. I don't know how to pronounce anything on that game. So, yeah, the Ange Floette Stadium gives each Mega Floette EX in play an extra 150 HP, bumping it up to 400 HP, which is crazy. There's no other Pokemon card that has that much HP, at least yet. But it does seem kind of like a hard setup, because first you have to have a Prism Tower Stadium in play, and then you have to find your Ange Floette. But it's easy to disrupt stadiums, so you might not have the 400 HP effect for long. So yeah, that's kind of why Mega Floette sucks in my opinion. Anyway, moving along to Phantump and Trevenant. Phantump's got a cool ability, Spiteful Evolution. Once during your turn, you may use this ability. Choose a card in your hand that evolves from this Pokemon and put it onto this Pokemon to evolve it. If you do, place 2 damage counters on the Pokemon you evolved in this way. You can't use this ability during your first turn. Trevenant's got some pretty cool attacks too. It's got Cursed Roots for 1 Psychic Energy, does 30 damage. During your opponent's next turn, energy can't be attached from your opponent's hand to the defending Pokemon. Kind of reminds me a little bit of Alolan Ninetales EX in Pokemon Pocket. Only in this case, it's the defending Pokemon and not your opponent's active Pokemon. A very big difference. Okay, second attack, Overwhelming Pain. 2 Psychic Energy, 60 damage. This attack does 10 more damage for each damage counter on all of your opponent's Pokemon. That could be something right there. I've heard it said before that Trevenant was probably likely meant to be paired with Gourgeist EX, with its attack Horrifying Rondo, does 30 base damage, but it says this attack does 50 more damage for each of your benched Pokemon that has any damage counters on it. And Phantom's ability puts damage counters on Trevenant, which is what you want if you want Gourgeist EX to do max damage with Horrifying Rondo. And speaking of Gourgeist EX, it's got 270 HP. Its other attack costs 2 Psychic Energy, does 140 damage, and it says discard a random card from your opponent's hand. So if your opponent's active Pokemon is something that's lower than 140 HP, or if it's only got less than 140 HP remaining, you probably want to do Ghostly Touch, because you definitely want to mill your opponent's hand, try to ruin their day, you know? That would be really funny. I think Xerneas is also a pretty interesting card. For 3 Psychic Energy, it's got the attack Geostorm, and it does 30 damage for each Psychic Energy attached to all of your Pokemon. I think this was actually meant to be played with Mega Floette, because its attack searches your deck for a bunch of Psychic Energy and attaches them to all your Pokemon. So yeah, I think this was actually meant to be paired with Xerneas. I think Mega Floette was maybe supposed to be like a support Pokemon, and Xerneas is the main attacker, but I still don't think Mega Floette is that good, because that attack that searches the Psychic Energy, the cost is too high, doesn't do enough damage, like I said before. Okay, on to the fighting types. Seems like we finally got a Mega Gallade EX. Mega Gallade is probably one of my favorite Mega Pokemon, because doesn't it just look awesome, man? I swear Gallade is like one of my favorite Pokemon ever. But anyway, it's got 350 HP, first attack Gale Slash, costs 1 fighting energy, does 50 base damage. However, if this Pokemon has no damage counters on it, this attack does 150 more damage, which would bump it up to 200 damage. 200 damage for 1 energy, it's pretty crazy, but I've actually thought of some ideas for a Mega Gallade deck that would make that damage go even higher. Like, you could attach Maximum Belt to Mega Gallade, so if you're going up against an EX Pokemon, that damage would be increased by 50. So you would do 250 damage instead of 200, and we've also got Premium Power Pro, which for each one you play during your turn makes your fighting Pokemon do 30 more damage to your opponent's active Pokemon. So if you're going up against an EX Pokemon, your Mega Gallade has no damage on it, you've got Maximum Belt attached, and you play 2 Premium Power Pros, that's 310 damage for a single energy, and that is wild, man. That's absolutely insane. There's a card I kind of overlooked up here. Sudowoodo. Its attack Trials and Tribulations for 1 colorless energy. Search your deck for up to 2 Transformation Tome cards, reveal them and put them into your hand, then shuffle your deck. I'm pretty sure Transformation Tome, you have to play 2 of them at once, and the effect only works once per game, I think. But what it does, once you play 2 of them, you switch a basic Pokemon in your discard pile with the basic Pokemon in play. I don't know if it has to be on the bench or not. We'll get to that in a bit. But yeah, you switch basic Pokemon between your discard pile and your bench, and all damage counters and special conditions and whatever remain on the new Pokemon. Now onto the dark types. There are a couple cards in here that I think are interesting, like Crobat. It's got its ability, having trouble reading this. Yeah, Nighttime Maneuvers, okay. I had a bit of trouble seeing that. It says, once during your turn, if this Pokemon is in the active spot, you may use this ability. Search your deck for a card, shuffle your deck, and then put that card on top of it. Almost like Cypher Maniac's Code Breaking, only it's 1 card instead of 2. Yeah, it's a great card for like controlling what your top deck is. It makes it easier to draw cards you need on your first turn. I think this could be great in dark type decks. The only problem I have with this card is that Crobat needs to be in the active spot in order to use this ability, and constantly getting it in and out of the active spot is probably a really annoying task. Looks like we also finally got Crocodile EX. This was a promo card over in Japan for a while. It's got 320 HP. Its first attack, Corner, 1 dark, 1 colorless, does 80 damage. During your opponent's next turn, the defending Pokemon can't retreat. So yeah, basically traps your opponent's active Pokemon in the active spot unless they've got something like Switch or Prime Catcher or something like that. But what I really like about this Pokemon is its attack Strong Bite. Costs 2 dark energy, 1 colorless, does 140 damage, but that attack damage gets doubled if this Pokemon has a Pokemon tool attached. I think there is one new tool in this set. I don't exactly remember what it does, but just at first glance, I think the Pokemon tool that I would attach to this Pokemon is probably Punk Helmet, because it places damage counters on your opponent's active Pokemon if it attacks Crocodile EX, or the Darkness type Pokemon that Punk Helmet is attached to. So yeah, I think that's going to be a very interesting deck to build. I'm definitely going to feature it in a future video, so stay tuned for that. It looks like a Garbodor, or Garbodor, I don't know how to pronounce this Pokemon's name. I'm just going to pronounce it Garbodor. It's got an ability, Gloomy Garbage. It says attacks used by your opponent's active Pokemon that has a Pokemon tool attached do 20 less damage before applying weakness and resistance. I mean, this is a little bit interesting, not gonna lie, but I really don't think this is gonna see a whole lot of play. I might be wrong, like I've said about every other card that I've said this about. So, I mean, I guess we'll see over the next couple of months. I mean, your opponent does have the choice not to attach tools. So, yeah, I'm not sure how good Garbodor is going to be. Looks like we got a new Beldum, Metang, and Metagross. I'm sorry if my face is in the way of the cards. I I suck at this, man. Yeah, the card that's most interesting of the three is Metagross, obviously, mainly because of its attack Metallic Hammer. Does 150 base damage, but says you may discard 3 metal energy from this Pokemon and have this attack do 150 more damage, bumping the attack up to 300. 300 damage with a non-EX Pokemon, it's pretty wild, but it is a pretty hefty cost, discarding 3 metal energy. I mean, you could use cards like Energy Recycler or Energy Retrieval to get them back into your deck or your hand or whatever. I think if you were to make a deck with this card, I think you'd want to run the Metang from Temporal Forces because of its Metal Maker ability. Because that will search, I think, the top 4 cards of your deck and attach any metal energy you find there to your Pokemon in any way you like. If you have like a bunch of Energy Recycler and a bunch of Metang and Metal Energy, you could probably do this over and over and over again, like constantly hit for 300 and annoy your opponent. Ferrothorn is one of the weirder cards I've seen in the set. Its ability, Startling Drop. It says during your opponent's next turn, if this Pokemon is discarded from your deck by an effect of an attacker or ability from your opponent's Pokemon, or by an effect of your opponent's item or supporter cards, discard the top 8 cards of your opponent's deck. This card, yeah, it's very, very weird. It's probably very hard for it to just get discarded by an effect of an attack or an ability from your opponent's Pokemon or an item or supporter card they might play. But if they do decide to like, if I was playing this and my opponent decides to like mill my deck or something, and they hit Ferrothorn, that's like ultimate payback. Because it's like, you're trying to mill my deck? Well, I'm going to mill a bajillion cards off of your deck and make your life miserable. But yeah, I don't really see this being very easy to play. Its attack Special Whip is fine, because it says if this Pokemon has any special energy attached, its attack does 70 more damage. I think we either got a Metal Special Energy in this set or the upcoming one, Pitch Black, that's coming out in July. But yeah, that Special Energy makes your Metal Pokemon have no retreat cost. And the retreat cost of Ferrothorn is 3, so I think that special energy would really help here. Plus, it doubles the attack of Special Whip. Kabalion EX. I actually got a Chaos Rising Elite Trainer box today, and I opened it, and I actually got Kabalion EX out of one of the packs. But I really don't like this card because Power Tackle, yeah, it only does 200 damage. Like I said about Mega Floette, it's not enough to knock out Fizandipede in one shot. And to make things even worse, you can't use Power Tackle back to back unless you have like multiple Kabalion in play, just going back and forth between the active spot and the bench. It is kind of easy to power up though because Metal Road. Once during your turn, when this Pokemon moves from your bench to the active spot, you may use this ability. Move any amount of metal energy from your other Pokemon to this Pokemon. So if you have a lot of energy on the board, you could retreat your active Pokemon, go into Kabalion, or use Switch or something like that, and move 3 metal energy from your other Pokemon to Kabalion, and you can instantly hit for 200 with Power Tackle. But yeah, I don't think this card's going to be that great. But like I've said a bajillion times before, I might be wrong. Let's see how things play out over the next couple months. Okay, on to the Dragon types now. Mega Dragalge EX. Got 2 really interesting attacks. Got 330 HP. It's a Dragon type, meaning it requires 2 different energy to use its attack. But its attacks are pretty good. Its first attack, Corrosive Liquid, says discard all Pokemon tools and special energy from all of your opponent's Pokemon. It does no damage. I mean, discarding all Pokemon tools and special energy from your opponent's side of the board, that can be really disruptive. That could be great in some games. But what I really like about this card, its other attack, Pernicious Poison, says your opponent's active Pokemon is now poisoned. During Pokemon Checkup, place 16 damage counters on that Pokemon instead of 1. So yeah, basically just poison times 16. And you can make it 18 damage counters if you've got Perilous Jungle in play. What's cool is you don't even do direct damage with this card, you just poison but place a lot more damage counters on your opponent's active Pokemon for being poisoned than normal. So once you attack with Pernicious Poison during Pokemon Checkup, you'll place 16 damage counters on your opponent's active Pokemon, or 18 if you got Perilous Jungle in play. But at the end of your opponent's next turn, unless they can find some way to remove the poison condition by moving their active Pokemon to the bench, or like a trainer card like Pokemon Center Lady or something, yeah, then into their next turn, they're probably going to be cooked. Yeah, the other Dragon type card that I thought was interesting in this set is Goodra because of Slimy Sliding. When your opponent's active Pokemon retreats, your opponent flips a coin. If tails, energy for its retreat cost is not discarded and they don't switch Pokemon. So it basically disrupts retreating, but the effect of Slimy Sliding doesn't stack. So you can't have a bunch of Goodra in play, have your opponent flip a jillion coins, and basically never be able to retreat. Tauros is also pretty interesting because its target together attack, choose one of your opponent's Pokemon and flip a coin for each of your Pokemon that in play that has Tauros in its name. So you could, I know there are a bunch of like Paldean Tauros cards in existence now. So you could have like a bunch of these on your bench, and this attack does 50 damage to the chosen Pokemon for each heads. So you can have 5 Pokemon on your bench and you have 1 active spot. So you could do like 50, 100, 150, 200, 250, 300 damage if you somehow flip all heads on all 6 coins. And doing 300 damage to any of your opponent's Pokemon would be nuts. But let's face it, that's probably not going to happen. That would probably, the odds of that happening are probably extremely low, like flipping 6 heads on a coin in a row. Patrat, its ability Watchful Eye. This is probably one of the most important cards in the set. Damage counters on each Pokemon, both yours and your opponent's, can't be moved to other Pokemon. So basically, it's like a Monkey Dory counter. It makes Monkey Dory not work. This is going to be a really annoying card for you Froslass Monkey Dory players, or just any player that has a Monkey Dory in their deck. But Don't overlook Watchdog either. I really like Snap Inspect. I really like Snap Inspection because it's a fact. Flip 3 coins. If any of them are heads, your opponent reveals their hand. For each heads, choose a card you find there and shuffle it into your opponent's deck. That's really funny because if you flip like 2 or 3 heads with Snap Inspection, your opponent will reveal their hand. So it's not even just choosing random cards. You get to pick what cards you shuffle back into their deck, and you could really make your opponent mad with this if you choose cards they really need in order to set up like what they're trying to do. And the last Pokemon I think is interesting in this set, Chinchino EX. It's got 240 HP. Its ability is Smooth Coat. If any damage is done to this Pokemon by attacks, flip a coin. If heads, prevent that damage. So yeah, if you keep flipping heads with the Smooth Coat, Chinchino could live forever. But the awesomeness of this card doesn't stop there. Energized Slap costs at least 1 colorless energy. This attack does 40 damage for each energy attached to this Pokemon. I've seen a deck list in one of PTCG Radio's videos where I don't know if it's his deck that he built or if it's some City League deck list that he found, but the deck list in that video, he runs Metang from Temporal Forces, and the strategy with that deck is to get your Metang out on your bench as fast as possible, use Metal Maker as many times as you can during your turn to attach as many metal energy to Chinchino as possible so it can hit for max damage with Energized Slap. That's definitely a deck I'm going to be playing on this YouTube channel, so if you want to watch that, stay tuned. Okay, now on to trainers. We did get one tool in the set, Adversity Policy. If the Pokemon this card is attached to has a weakness to your opponent's active Pokemon's type, is in the active spot, and is damaged by an attack from your opponent's Pokemon, even if this Pokemon is knocked out, draw 3 cards. That's pretty cool. I don't know if I'd play this with Crocodile EX, unless I constantly got matched up against like grass decks like Ogerpon and Meganium. But yeah, it's basically if you got matched up against something that you're weak against, Adversity Policy becomes like your free 3-card draw every single time your opponent attacks you, even if your active Pokemon is knocked out, and I think that's pretty good. And right there is the stadium card I was talking about earlier, Ange Floette. It says you can put this card into play only if you discard a Prism Tower in play, and you can put this card into play during the same turn as you play Prism Tower. Each Mega Floette EX in play, both yours and your opponent's, gets 150 plus HP, which would bump up the HP stat of Mega Floette from 250 to 400. But like I said a bajillion times earlier, I don't think Mega Floette's going to be that great. We got another stadium down here, Prism Tower, something that seems to be a lot more useful than Ange Floette. Once during each player's turn, that player may discard 2 cards from their hand to draw a card. I've heard before that this would be a great card in like Ceruledge EX decks, because if you got like 2 energies in your hand, you could discard both of them to draw a card. And Ceruledge's attack does, I think, 20 more damage for each energy in your discard pile. So yeah, Prism Tower would probably be a great addition to the Ceruledge EX deck. And we've got a few more supporters, 4 to be specific. We've got AZ's Tranquility. Switch your active Pokemon with one of your benched Pokemon. If you move the Pokemon EX to your bench in this way, heal 80 damage from that Pokemon. So I guess a great healer card if your EX or your Mega EX is heavily damaged and you need to heal it, and you've got another Pokemon on your bench that can function as a secondary attacker, you can use AZ's Tranquility to switch the Pokemon and heal damage. Okay, we got the Emma supporter. Your opponent reveals their hand and you draw a card for each Pokemon you find there. This card is obviously going to be really great if your opponent has like a big hand and there's a bunch of Pokemon in there and you can just draw a bunch of cards, which I think is really great. You've got Philip or Felipe, I don't know how to pronounce that, but it says attach up to 2 basic metal energy cards from your discard pile to one of your metal type Pokemon. I think this will be a great card once Pitch Black comes out. We haven't really gotten any great metal type cards in this set that this card would work really well with, but I'm sure there's cards that have been released in the past that Philip would work well with. Like, I think I saw someone on YouTube say something about Mega Mawile uh, in this card. So I guess we'll just see how things play out over the next couple months. See what this card. So let's see what Pokemon that this card supports the best. And we've got Roxy's Performance down here. It says during your opponent's next turn, their poisoned Pokemon can't retreat. This includes newly poisoned Pokemon. I think this was meant to be played with Mega Dragalge, because you can play Roxy's Performance during your turn, and then attack with Pernicious Poison to poison your opponent's active Pokemon. And on top of the 16 damage counters in between turns instead of 1, or 18 damage counters if you have Perilous Jungle in play, with the addition of Roxy's Performance, you could trap your opponent's active Pokemon in the active spot, and I think that's going to be a really powerful combo right there. Just whacked my desk. Hurt my hand. Sucks. Okay, as for items, we've got Great Hall Net. It says choose one or both. Shuffle up to 3 water-type Pokemon from your discard pile into your deck, or you can shuffle up to 3 basic water energy cards from your discard pile into your deck. I'm not sure if this is going to become a staple for every single water-type deck or not. I mean, I don't have it in my Mega Greninja deck, but I know Wailord EX is coming up in Pitch Black, so I think Great Hall Net is going to be a great card to play in a Wailord EX deck. Wailord EX's attack, it costs 5 water energy, so when it gets knocked out, you can play Great Hall Net to shuffle up to 3 basic water energy cards from your discard pile into your deck. But enough about Pitch Black. This is a Chaos Rising set review, so I'm just going to stick to the topic here. The last 2 items we've got in this set are Special Red Card and Transformation Tome. And I know for sure that Special Red Card is going to become a staple in pretty much every single deck, because we finally got good hand disruption that isn't unfair stamp, so it frees up our ace spec options for deck building. It says you can use this card only if your opponent has 3 or fewer prize cards remaining. So this card will only work in like the late game. It can really turn matches around. I've played this card in my Mega Greninja deck. I've annoyed my opponent a lot with Special Red Card, with disrupting their hand. Oh yeah, and Transformation Tome, when I was talking about Sudowoodo earlier. But yeah, this is the card. You must play 2 Transformation Tome cards at once. This effect works 1 time for 2 cards. So I think that means you can only play this card once per game. But yeah, it says choose a basic Pokemon in your discard pile and switch it with one of your basic Pokemon in play. Okay, so it doesn't have to be on your bench. And the attached cards, damage counters, special conditions, turns in play, and any other effects remain on the new Pokemon. Okay, and we've got 3 special energy. I'm just going to make sure you guys can see that. Okay, we got Bubbly Water Energy. As long as this card is attached to a Pokemon, it provides water energy, or 1 water energy. The water Pokemon this card is attached to recovers from all special conditions and can't be affected by any special conditions. So when Pitch Black comes out, it'll give water decks basically immunity against Mega Darkrai. But like I said, with Philip, this is not a Pitch Black set review, it's a Chaos Rising set review, so I'm not going to say too much about Pitch Black. But I think Bubbly Water Energy is going to be great for water-type decks, because it gives you immunity against special conditions, which I think is great. Wait a minute, you could actually counter against Mega Dragalge with this. That would be really great. And we got Magnetic Metal Energy. As long as this card is attached to a Pokemon, it provides metal energy. The metal Pokemon this card is attached to has no retreat costs. Yeah, I said that earlier. Don't really need to elaborate too much more on that card. And the last special energy, we've got Nitro Fire Energy. As long as this card is attached to a Pokemon, it provides 1 fire energy. If this card is discarded by an effective attack used by the fire Pokemon this card is attached to, put this card into your hand after attack damage and effects. pretty nice. And full arts, I mean, I'm not really going to say too much about those, other than that they look really cool. Especially the special art rares. I really like the special art rare Greninja and Dragalge. They just look really, really cool. I actually have both of them on Pokemon TCG Live. And for the gold card, yeah, we've got the gold Mega Greninja. Looks great. So yeah, that was the set review of Chaos Rising. Anyway, guys, that was the end of the video. If you liked it, be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. And I'll see you in the next video. God bless.